Friday, the 11th of November 2022 is the date today, and this is the edition of the Friday Breakfast Show, where we specifically look at the business sector of what is happening around in the country. I am your host this morning. My name is Prudence Tota, and I will carry you through to the next hour at about 10 minutes, where we will be discussing a very important topic on this program this morning. It is important every morning when you wake up to say thank you, God Almighty, for giving me the gift of life, and of course do other activities that will enable you be productive during the day. And among some of the activities we're talking about is exercising. If you do not exercise in the morning, remember to do that before going to bed. It is important for you to keep health all the time. A healthy nation depends on a healthy people. We always emphasize when we come on this program. We sincerely apologize for starting the program slightly late, but we have important discussions that we will be discussing this morning, and you, our viewer, can participate by sending us those messages on our Facebook platform. We are live on our Facebook platform, and you have to send a message. You can send through a message on our Facebook platform. I do understand that we are having a little bit of a challenge with our phone line, but we hope that problem will be rectified soon. So that's why a lot of you have been unable to call on the program this week, but the problem is being rectified. So if you have to send a contribution, you can just do that through our Facebook platform, and we will be able to read and respond to some of those messages. For everyone watching us on different platforms, it can be on the gadget, you're going for work, or you're traveling out of Zambia or anywhere, or maybe you're just in the comfort of your home. Keep watching Camnet TV. We appreciate your viewership, and every comment and solution that you have matters on this program. That's why we encourage you, when we have certain topics that we are discussing, to just call and make those contributions and submissions, because the solution to some of the challenges the country is facing lies in you, and you bringing out your voice is the only way you can positively contribute to the development of Zambia. Remember, we only have one Zambia, one nation. There will be no other country better than Zambia where we are now. That's why we are seeing investors come all the way from other countries to come and invest in Zambia, because this is the Zambia that we have, a very peaceful nation, good for investment, good for business, and it is the Zambia for all. So remember to always contribute and make those submissions, because your contribution might just be a solution that this country needs. So even right about now, we are going to go directly into our morning boost, where we encourage you to go along with us, exercise with us. If you are able to, this program is live in the evening when you knock off before going for bed. Just exercise. Ensure that you are healthy all the time. To all our fans, we appreciate your viewership. I know you've been looking forward to hearing what is it that we are discussing on the platform this morning. Yes, we are live, and we are coming through to the studio. Camnet TV in Ibex Hill. Supposing you don't know where we are, you want to advertise, bring those advertisements on Camnet TV. We are based in Ibex Hill, just opposite Hilltop Hospital is where you will find Camnet TV. So right about now, we are going to go into our morning boost. Stay tuned to Camnet TV.
Hi ladies and gentlemen, Cholwe again from Cho's Fitness Gym at Camnet Fitness segment. Alright, so we're going to start with the stretching. Again, as usual, stretching, very important here. Top. You want to stretch those muscles every time before you begin working out. Stretch.
I know exactly what I have to do. I don't wanna be alone tonight. You're the one that make me feel always somebody new. Oh, baby, I'm dancing with a stranger. You're the one that make me feel always somebody new. Oh, baby, I'm dancing with a stranger. Dancing with a stranger.
jump front and jump behind. You go. That's gonna get your pumping, jump front, jump front. Remember, 1 minute. You can go longer. The sequence many times as possible. Okay, next one. Here, take a deep breath in and out. We're gonna go for 10 to the side. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. The other side, we're gonna go for 10. 1, 2, 3. This is actually like a stretch also. 4, 5, that's 6, that's 7, 8, that's 9, 10. We go for 5. And this is a minute countdown. 2, make sure I breathe in. 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We go for 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Next one, 1 minute. We're just gonna run on the spot. Go at your own pace. If that's too hard, here, 1, 2, 3. There's always something for everyone. Size, excuses, modified, beginner, advanced, intermediate.
And what's the point of hiding? Everybody knows you got unfinished business. And I regret it if you didn't say this isn't what it could be. You could break my heart in two, but when it heals, it is for you. I know it's forward, but it's true. You could break my heart in two, but when it heals, it is for you. I know it's forward, but it's true. I wanna hold you when I'm not supposed to, when I'm lying close to someone else. You're stuck in my head, and I can get you out of it. If I could do it all again, I know I'd go back to you.
Then side to side, side to side. Breathe, breathe. Thank you.
There you have it. I hope we have exercised this morning. Remember, a healthy nation relies on a healthy people, and Camnet TV cares for your health. That's why we bring you that segment where you can exercise along with us. If you are unable to do that because maybe you've reported for work this morning, you can do that in the evenings when you knock off, when you're before going to bed. You exercise, you take a bath, you sleep. You have good nights, no one chasing you, and you're failing to run because your body is fit and you are in good shape. So remember to always exercise. If you are able to do it in the morning, you can do it at your own time. It might not be in the evening, but it might even be during the course of the day. But remember, to keep healthy is important, and we need you because we need a healthy nation. So even right about now, we are going to look at the money market. How is it that our local currency is performing against other major convertibles before we can go into discussing today's topic? So there you have it. That is our money market this morning. The Zambian kwacha against the Great British Pound is buying at 18 kwacha 76 ngwe and selling at 19 kwacha 13 ngwe. The Zambian kwacha against the United States dollar is buying at 16 kwacha 20 ngwe and selling at 16 kwacha 58 ngwe. The Zambian kwacha against the euro is buying at 16 kwacha 37 ngwe and selling at 16 kwacha 69 ngwe. The Zambian kwacha against the South African rand is buying at 0.93 ngwe and selling at 0.94 ngwe. That is the money market for this morning. Kwacha is kind of depreciating compared to how it has been performing in the last 3 months, and looking at where we are there, we've seen a little bit of our local currency depreciating. But we hope all the best to the UPND administration, even as they look to sustain our country, of course, and lower the cost of living and everything that is involved in that. So that is a money market for this morning, Friday, the 11th of November, 2022. So we are discussing how sustainable is the energy sector in Zambia. That is a topic this morning. And in studio, I am joined by our guest, who's not new to the screens of Camnet TV, but he is an expert in the energy sector, and that is Dr. Johnston Chikwanda. Sir, good morning.
Good morning to you, and good morning, viewers.
It's good to have you back on this program this morning.
I'm happy to be back.
It's been quite a while. The set, of course, I'm sure they did miss your presence to just discuss a lot of important aspects that are happening in our country. Maybe a lot of guests there who are just watching, a lot of viewers who are just watching would like to know, Mr. Chikwanda, who is he? So maybe just a brief introduction about yourself, even as we begin to look at the topic of discussion this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, my name is Johnston Chikwanda. I have been in the energy sector for 22 years now, both in Zambia and in South Africa, where I was living and working, and done a lot of consultancies, a lot of research. I'm an engineer and a fellow of the Engineering Institute of Zambia.
Okay.
And my master's program, which I did, the research work was in the energy sector. My PhD, the research part of it was also in the energy sector. And I have sat on the Energy Regulation Board of directors in 2012. I have sat on Indeni board, Indeni refinery. In fact, I was privileged to even chair that board. I was there for about 3 years. And I have also served on the Rural Electrification Authority board. And I was also privileged to chair the Rural Electrification Authority board of directors, and on many other industry committees.
I'm sure when we mention that Dr. Chikwanda is an energy expert, from just the introduction he's given us, you would really agree with me that indeed he is an energy expert. How sustainable is Zambia's energy sector is the topic we're discussing this morning. And just to dive into the meat, Mr. Chikwanda, let's go straight to the monthly pump price review of fuel. I know the last time I hosted you on this program, when this initiative was just being discussed, you are one of those who supported this particular initiative to have our pump price reviewed every month. So how sustainable has this been so far from the experience that you've had in the last 5 months, 6 months that this has been in effect?
That's a good question. I'm one of them that have supported that policy direction. If you remember, we used to have our price reviews 60 days previously. Sometimes it was not even known when the prices would go down. Then we were in subsidies. But at that time, we were relying on the Indeni Petroleum Refinery, and the cycle from the time you order the shipload up to the time you have it in the country, it would take about 45 days or so. So then it made a lot of sense to be reviewing the prices around 60 days. But then Indeni started failing to meet the national demand, so we started bringing fuel by road as well. So we started to change the dynamics until the policy adoption, which is similar to what is happening in the region, was adopted, and that is the 30 days review of the price, because it describes closely what is happening on the ground and in other countries as well. But looking at the, when you implement a policy direction, you need also to assess how it is doing. I think we have done at least a year now on this policy. And having collected the views from leading oil marketing companies and just generally the way it is going, I am tending to think that maybe it is too short, in the sense that fuel mainly is coming from Dar es Salaam, is also coming from Beira.
Okay.
Now that which comes from Beira, it will take about 10 days for the fuel to arrive here. And that if you're bringing it from Dar es Salaam, it's about 2 weeks. So that means you only have a window period of about 2 weeks to ensure that you finish all your fuel that you have imported. Otherwise, you might end up being caught up with a new price when you have got so much fuel. Okay. So when faced with that kind of a situation, the oil marketing companies tend not to import a lot because they are very cautious of that the price maybe might go down, and I want to have 2 weeks from to dispose of this stock. So it is hindering to some extent the accumulation of enough fuel stock in the country by the private sector. And you tend to think that maybe there is a need to assess it, and is it delivering to the expectation of everyone, from government point of view, from the oil marketing companies point of view, from the customers point of view, the consumers. And if it is not, can it be maybe adjusted maybe to 45 days? Or can it be maybe adjusted to 60 days? And so you want to think like that, because also of the distance from the cost mainly. If you are on the coast, it will save you better. So we are using M-1, what we call M-1, or maybe just to simplify, which is simply on 30 days. South Africa is doing the same, Mozambique is doing the same, but some of his colleagues are on the coast. So when the fuel arrives and you get it as an importer, you have got virtually almost a month to deal with it, because it is you are already at a cost. But if you are so much inland, for you to transport that fuel inside the country, it might take you 14 to 21 days, and you only have got a very short window period to dispose it off. Otherwise, you'll be happy if the price will go up, but the potential for the price to go down is also there. So that kind of space may be constraining the ability to stockpile.
Wow, very powerful submission there. So going forward, the monthly performance or the monthly review of fuel, can you say going forward it's not sustainable? Is that what you're saying?
It's, I think the best way is to assess. What I would be appealing for is, can we assess it, how it has performed, this policy over the past 1 year. Engage all the stakeholders. What are the views from the stakeholders? What is it that can happen if we move it to 60 days? Then we can come to that conclusion. But looking at the infrastructural problems, the logistical hiccups that it takes to move the fuel from the coast into the country, then I'm tending to think that the 30 days might not be very favorable. So, but it's important to engage other stakeholders to move forward.
Okay. I think couple of months, I think it should be a month and some weeks ago, you did predict that if government completely removed the tax breaks that were given to the fuel sector, we might see the price shoot up by 40%. But that we've not yet seen it happen. Why did you think so? And why do you think that has not happened after government removed that tax waiver? Or is it just a matter of time before that comes in effect?
Well, then there were a lot of taxes that were waived, a lot of them. Excise duty was partially waived. Customs duty is 25% waived. VAT 16% waived. Just when you add these two, customs duty and the VAT, that's already 41%. They were all waived. And there was a genuine concern then, if these taxes were to be brought back at the same time, definitely that was going to push the price by not less than 41%, or the landed price. So maybe the pump price would have gone up maybe by 35% or or so, because numbers do not lie. So what we thought now, what we saw is that the government, I think, got consent, of course, through the Energy Regulation Board, especially that the prices have been building up because of what's happening in the global economy, global industry. You see the wars and all these geopolitical issues. So the prices have been building up, because the best time that you may have to look for to reintegrate such kind of taxes is when the prices are going down, not when they are going up. So what we've seen is government has reintegrated them partially.
Okay.
In a staggered approach, because what has been brought back is essentially VAT and excise duty, but there is customs duty at 25%, which has not yet been brought back.
Okay.
And they will bring it back.
We are seeing in some parts of the country, like in Eastern Province, Lundazi to be specific, where erratic shortage of fuel has hit the district. I know you are a player in this sector, and we are discussing how sustainable this is. What do you think might be contributing to this shortage in that part of the country? And then going forward, how is it that we can ensure that we permanently deal with such challenges?
I think the fuel supply generally this year has been quite stable. And we haven't had those moments of stockouts and things like that, mainly because there are a lot of players now in the industry. But we also know that certain towns are not, they maybe only have one oil company, maybe one filling station or two filling stations. So you can have a situation where it can be caused by a major issue in the economy, or it can be caused by just an oil marketing company that owns that particular filling station. Maybe they have got, they don't have enough stock, they don't have, challenges affecting them. It can even be the dealer, because some of the petrol stations are franchised to the dealer. So the dealer maybe, is facing different types of challenges, and so maybe they get cut off by the supply line, and from the supply line. So I heard about that, but what is it that caused that? I'm not very privy, because it can be a number of issues. There is fuel in the country, I'm aware, about maybe 10 days or so, and so it could be other factors that are causing that differently. Not that there isn't fuel in the country, that there is.
No, we are sure of that. We did inspect some filling stations actually in Lusaka, and I can attest to that, to say there's fuel. But on this just certain part of the country, Eastern to be specific, it has been quite a challenge. And we did air part of the story in our news yesterday, where we just visited what was happening in that province to just show the shortage that is there. We've been hoping to get a comment from the Minister of Energy. We were unsuccessful yesterday, but we will keep pushing to ensure that we try to find out why this has been a case in this particular sector of the country. But maybe, Dr. Chikwanda, do you think maybe we should reconsider opening Indeni at this point, looking at what you've just mentioned as the way the performance of the monthly review has been? Do you think we should maybe reconsider the Indeni issue?
I think Indeni is gone. And the only point that I know it will be reopened is when government decides to process a crude oil which is currently trapped in the pipeline.
Okay.
Because it's got the crude oil now almost for 2 years, which is inside there. And that will have to be taken out and processed. So that is the only time that I think it will reopen. I think the grounds are very strong. I personally think that there was an opportunity that we missed as a country to have resuscitated Indeni Petroleum Refinery. I remember when we were there, there are certain options that were provided, which I think if those were implemented, the story would have been a completely different picture at the refinery, but the shareholders thought differently. So at this particular time, looking at the inflection of time, the time that has passed, whether it would be prudent to start reopening it and so on and so forth, I think the policy shift is already cast. The new government wants to bring fuel in the country refined by pipeline, and they are busy conducting roadshows for more pipelines. And I just don't see that happening to go back to reopening them.
But you've said we still have some fuel trapped in the pipeline.
Yes, 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 of
For a
course.
period of 2 years, don't you think that's too much? Maybe the oil is already contaminated, and if we are maybe to try to pump it out, it will just be for the purpose of cleaning the pipeline.
Well, the best scenario is not to keep fuel for that long, whether it is refined or it's crude. I think 2 years is a lot of time to keep fuel in a pipeline. It's a lot of time. I can only hope that whatever it is that has been causing that delay gets resolved as soon as possible.
Of course, this is a breakfast show that comes to your set every morning. And this morning, we are discussing how sustainable is the energy sector in Zambia. I am joined in studio by Dr. Johnston Chikwanda. He is an energy expert, and we've looked at the performance of the fuel sector so far. A very important submissions have been made by Dr. Chikwanda in that area, and we hope the stakeholders are listening. And everyone who's watching this program, you can make contribution by sending those questions and contribution on our Facebook platform, or if possible, you can call and make that submission. We know also that government had undertaken the process of the cost of service study, which commenced in 2019 and was undertaken by Energy Market and Regulatory Consultants of the United Kingdom and independent consultants with financing from the African Development Bank at a cost of $592,000 United States dollars. The aim of the study was to determine the Zambian power system full cost of electricity supply, and in turn determine the appropriate tariff levels that would enable the power utility company improve their services and meet the growing demand. This particular study has been a topic of great concern. A lot of stakeholders were calling on government to release the findings of this study from 2019, of which the government has released what is called a green paper, Mr. Chikwanda, if I'm not mistaken. Let me maybe just take you to that a little bit. We are now looking at the energy sector in our country. Have you taken time to just go through this green paper that was released by the independent consultant company?
I have been following this issue for a long time, from the time that the consultant was engaged, and the report was presented finally by the consultant, and the report was submitted to government, and it was deliberated upon by Cabinet, and the Cabinet produced what is called a green paper, which is containing government's position on the various recommendations from the consultant. And because electricity is such a big issue, and you know that you cannot change anything without consulting the members of the public, the Energy Regulation Board has been conducting roadshows across the country. I think they were in Southern Province the other week, they are in Eastern Province this week, in order to get members of the public to comment, also to give them an opportunity to comment on this green paper, because when they collect all these views, they will present back to government and lead to what will be called a white paper, which could lead now to implementing some of these recommendations. So I've gone through the green paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to the first findings in this paper. The independent consultant did predict that peak electricity demand will increase by 95% from 2,143 megawatts that we are currently relying on in 2020 to about 4,169 megawatts by 2040. The demand will be largely driven by residential consumers with a projected growth rate of 1.3% annually. But when we come to government has accepted the recommendation that has been made to say they need to invest more in the energy sector. But the New Dawn government's desire to attain universal access to electricity, stimulate agriculture production, support industrial development, achieve copper production of 30 million over the next decade, and establish Zambia as a hub for electricity. With these consumptions, recent projection shows that the peak demand is estimated at 8,000 megawatts by 2030 and about 10,000 megawatts by 2040. This is therefore the national load forecast demand is envisaged to be driven by the mining and agriculture demand, not necessarily residential consumers. So this is according to the government. So because government has got this desire of increasing agriculture production and of course the mining sector, the independent consultant did mention to the fact that residential consumption will be the driving force, but the government disagrees and says, I think the mining sector and the agriculture sector will be the major drivers. Maybe let me throw it to you as an expert in this area. How do you look at the two recommendations and, of course, government's point of view on this particular recommendation?
You know, the challenge, I think, is that the work took too long because they started the work in 2019. Of course, we had the spells of COVID which hindered the work. So from that time up to now, a lot of changes have taken place. And I'm not sure whether they updated the report to bring it to speed to the current situation. There is now a new government which has come with its own new priorities. See, so you cannot downplay what the intention is by the new government, because they have been consistent, and these things are in their manifesto, where they said that they want to increase copper production from the current 700,000 to 3 million tons over the next 10 years. So that will mean you're going to need a lot of power, incredibly a lot of power, because about 60% of energy goes to the mining industry. So if you are going to more than double the production, actually 3 times from the current production, we're going to need more than double the current power output that we have very, very soon. So I tend to concur with the government's position on that particular score, that that load forecast which was done by the consultant was on the conservative part, all things being equal. All things being equal. But the punchline there is that Zambia's energy sector is growing. Of course, you cannot take away the growth of the domestic. The domestic, is also growing significantly, but I don't think that it will be the main vector that will be driving the demand for electricity. We expect a lot from the industry. So to that end, I think government is on firm ground that what will be driving is not really the residential, but these other sectors where government wants to do. And of course, universal access, which still talks to residential anyway, especially the rural areas, cannot be factored out.
Maybe let me throw this to you. Do you think the current tariff price that we as consumers are paying is enough or is profitable for ZESCO and other suppliers of electricity? Before maybe we even go further, the current tariff, do you think it is sustainable?
The Zambian electricity tariff has not been cost reflective. That we know. That's why Zambia has had one of the lowest electricity tariffs, in the region. That has been raised at different platforms and different angles. And of course, it's not just residential. I know this is a very hot issue. Each time we talk about electricity tariffs, I know the residential, the consumers, they jump up. And I'm also paying quite a lot. But there are different categories of customers, and it is very, very possible that some of them have not been paying cost-reflective tariffs. But that debate, to make sure that we situate it correctly, this is why the cost of service study was commissioned, so that we try to rest this debate of saying, no, me, I'm paying too much, or me, this customer segment, and we are paying too much, we are subsidizing for the other. And so this paper now has highlighted who is paying what and who is not paying what they should be paying, or if there is somebody who is overpaying. So that is what this paper has done. And the most prudent way that this thing is being done, which I've really liked, to be honest with you, is that it is now going around the country the paper. You can't find that in many countries where since you have to go and start engaging your customers that, look, this is a situation now that we are faced. How do we move together?
Very important discussion. How sustainable is Zambia's energy sector is the topic we are discussing this morning. Remember, the cost of service study report was released. What is called a green paper has been released, and this is what we are part of what we are discussing, among other things. The fuel sector, we have discussed about that, and now we are on the energy sector. So even before we can discuss more about the findings of the report, we are going to take a short breather, and we will be back to continue with our discussion. So for now, we are going to go on a short break. Stay tuned to Camnet TV. We will be right back.
For immediate coverage of any breaking or latest news in Zambia and around the world on Camnet Television, call the numbers on your screen. Camnet Television, bringing to your screens fair news, impartial news, credible and reliable news all the time. Get the whole truth on Camnet World News. Camnet Television, not just another channel.
Cabbages, onions, maize, potatoes, tomatoes, chilies. At Raingrow, we supply great quality irrigation for the mentioned crops and more at an affordable price. Get our 2,000 meter flat drip for as low as 2,900 kwacha, or our 500 meter round hose for 1,300 kwacha. Customize your own spacing with our 500 meter blank round hose going for 1,200 kwacha, ideal for orchards such as avocado, mango, banana, oranges, etc. Rainglow Irrigation, best quality, best price.
bananas. Working, waiting, this what you've been praying for.
There you have it. Camnet TV Breakfast Show is the show you are on this morning. How sustainable is our energy sector is the topic we are discussing. And of course, in studio, I am joined by the energy expert, Dr. Johnston Chikwanda, and we are discussing an important thing with regards to the cost of service study that was undertaken by a private institution that was engaged since 2019. A lot of people were saying release the findings of the cost of study, and the United Party for National Development, UPND administration, has done just that. And this morning, we are looking at things that were recommended in this study. So we did, of course, discuss earlier, Dr. Chikwanda, about some of the findings that were in the report. And we are now moving on to economic tariff. According to the cost of service study, it determined that revenue required for ZESCO based on marginal revenue for a 5-year period ranged from 1.2 billion to 1.4 billion annually, meaning the current tariff will not yield the desired revenue requirement. So the cost of study determined that economic tariff should be increased by an average of 17% over the next 5 years. The study places a heavy tariff burden on residential customers and subsequently reduces electricity tariff for maximum demand and power purchase agreement customers. Do you agree with the findings of this study and the recommendation that was made on the issue of increasing increasing by 17% for our own consumers?
What I have always known was that the tariffs are not cost reflective for some customer demographics, and that they were going to go up.
Okay.
Definitely. What the consultant has recommended is that the tariffs must increase by an average of 17% over the next 5 years. Over the next 5 years. That is not very frightening, because if they said within 1 year, then it means that we're going to be talking of tariffs going up by about 17%. But over 5 years, that means that the increase on average, we are talking of about 3%. 3% increase on average over the next 5 years. I think, Prudence, that's quite modest. 3% increase over the next 5 years, every year. It doesn't sound very, I think it's quite modest.
Okay.
But maybe what requires to be understood, because they are using the word average. So that means that different customers there may be charged higher, whilst others may be charged lower. So that when you add all these, you aggregate them, it is coming to an average of 17%. Maybe that is what the report there is alluding to, that it places a higher burden. Because by it being on average 17 doesn't mean that for all the different customer categories it is at 17. It means that there are others who are going to be charged low, there are others who are going to be charged higher. So it's possible that maybe for the residential, maybe it is more than 17%, which could be what that fear we are seeing in that report. But I think the recommendation there was that can we please, as far as possible, can we distribute the increase properly? We revisit that, and that is what is coming from government. And I think I haven't had sight on the actual tariff proposition for residential alone and for other customer demographics over the next 5 years. But whichever the case, 17 to me seems to be fair over 5 years. 17%. If we can manage that, that is, that is quite modest, because it's talking to about 3% only on average every year. However, it is important to unpack and see what exactly is each customer demographic going to be subjected to.
But Dr. Chikwanda, don't you think for those in rural areas, we know that there is the demand for power is also going as far as people in the rural areas. Don't you think it will be expensive for those in rural areas, also considering how much they rely on electricity? They rely little on electricity, if anything, but it is important, even for their businesses. But if we keep increasing the tariff almost every year, don't you think it will become expensive for people in the rural areas, which would defeat the purpose of wanting to electrify rural areas?
Well, electricity is a socio-economic issue, and so whenever tariff adjustments are being made, that has to be taken into consideration. This is why there is what we call a cost line. There is a cost line there, which currently sits at 100 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts per month. That is the lifeline. So when you look at the people in the rural areas that you are talking about, how much electricity that they consume very, very little electricity, such that they are virtually covered. They are virtually covered by the cost line, or just slightly above. So I think under the current subsidy of that lifeline, the most vulnerable of our people are covered. They are covered in that. What agitates me to some extent is maybe the connection fees. That's where we need to be very careful, because this electricity now, consumption, you can control it as a consumer, because it's got meters, so you can decide how much you want to use. But the connection fee, there you have to be a little bit more careful, because if they are paying the same, those people in the rural areas and in the urban areas, same amount, which is huge, then that will create a barrier. Like, if you're going to ask rural areas to pay 9,000 per connection, they won't manage that. Not even 5,000, most of them cannot manage that. So on the connection fees, there we need to be careful. But come up with a lot of better creative ways of spreading the cost. But for what you are consuming, at least that you can manage to control. Again,
Dr. Chikwanda, talking about what we are consuming. Already, a lot of families use electricity only for lighting. We know that the electricity that we use in Zambia is clean energy, and we are using it so much for lighting as opposed to cooking, because it becomes expensive if you have to use your cooker in some places or in some homes. I was just complaining about last month, where I used more than 400, close to 500 of electricity. That was like, when I look at that, I'm like, if you look at most of the income levels for most government workers or people, civil servants, and the use of electricity, where you have to use 500, 600 to buy electricity, don't you think that becomes expensive if the tariff keeps going up? And it will also encourage people to use more of charcoal, which is going to result in a lot of cutting down of trees.
Yeah, again, it comes back to the same issue. Electricity being a socio-economic issue, and Zambia has not shied away from supporting people. That's why all these years the tariffs have been kept low. They have not been cost reflective, meaning that there has been subsidies which have been there. But you have to be careful with the subsidies as well if you are going to perpetuate them, because they can ruin other prospects of taking money to different other needy areas. So you have to strike a balance here in terms of who should pay what. And I remember, I think I was on one of the shows where I said maybe we need to revisit the residential categories, because there is R1 and there is R2 there. R1, it's those that are consuming, I think, 100 kilowatts or something there and below, and then there is R2 as well, where most of the middle class is. Maybe we need to, that band might be too big. Maybe we need to further split that so that even in the middle class itself, there are those that are lower middle class.
Yes,
there is
yes,
also
yes.
upper middle class. So maybe if that also is split, and then you differentiate and come up with a tariff for the lower middle class, because that's where most of the people seem to be. Those who are working and things like that. So I think that could be good conversation, and I hope that that can be taken up.
Yeah,
and,
a very important
to.
submission there.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, because one thing I noticed is when I used to stay in a densely populated area at one point, we would use electricity, and when we buy electricity, we would even be given a bonus for that. But when I moved to slightly a place that is less denser, the use of electricity became different. What I would buy then and what I would buy now cannot even go even for 2 weeks or even sometimes a week. And those bonuses we used to be given then, we no longer get where we are now. So maybe when you talk about lower class, middle lower class, it makes a lot of sense, because in those areas where they use less of electricity, they don't have to literally pay more for that.
But also maybe Prudence has to add on, to help people. We have become captives of ZESCO. There is a lot of renewable energy sources now on the market. You can buy those rechargeable lamps. You can buy some solar lamps. When you go home, the first thing that comes is to switch on ZESCO Electric. Why can't you switch on even that solar charge lamp for certain rooms? Because they give you the same light. So we need to become also, to do something on our part as well, and demonstrate that we are doing something. Get some of these lamps, use them. They use sun, to just charge them, and also, if possible, get also some solar panels, if it is possible. I know people say no, but it's expensive. But I also know that people are in so many village banks and things like that. If you are 5 of you or 10 of you in a village bank, he said every time they meet, they borrow money, they lend money to one another. Why don't we invest in solar panels for members of the village bank, for instance?
Well, you say this month we are
this
buying
month
for
we are
this
buying
one.
for you. This month we are buying for you. I can tell you that will help people a lot. And for the solar geyser, if you are staying in a rented house, you can also engage the landlord and say, can we want to change this thing and put a solar geyser here, because 60% of electricity is the cooker and the solar geyser. Yes.
Yeah, you're right on
And
that
the
one.
geyser.
Yeah, very right on that one. Doc, moving forward, study findings, lifeline tariff. The study has proposed a reduction in the lifeline tariff bound to 0.50 kilowatt per month from the current 0 to 100 kilowatt per month, in line with regional benchmark. The study further proposed that the difference between the lifeline tariff and the cost-reflective residential tariff should be met by the residential customers consuming above the life bound. Do you agree that we need to reduce on the life bound to 0.50 megawatts from the current 0 to 100 megawatts?
I think the issue there is the definition of the lifeline and who qualifies for that lifeline. What is the basis for the lifeline? When this came up, the issue of giving a lifeline, it was intended for the most vulnerable of our people in society. That was a target group, the most vulnerable of our people, so that they can almost be using free electricity.
Okay.
So the issue now is how many of our most vulnerable people do we have who have got electricity? They are very few. The majority of Zambia's vulnerable people are not on electricity. They are not connected at all. So that tariff is now supposed to be for the little of our vulnerable people who are on electricity, and also those that want to be migrated to be reconnected to electricity. So if now I take a typical case of a vulnerable person, I was in village chiefdom Sikufele in southern western province thereabout. When you look at a typical vulnerable home in Zambia, whether it is in Sikufele or it is in Sairunga, I mentioned areas I've been to, or on the Bangweru, Kasomalunga. When you look typically, you will find that actually a vulnerable home, they use very little electricity, very little electricity which they use, because they don't have cookers, they don't have obviously stoves, they're just using for lighting here, maybe that. So their consumption is perhaps not even 100 kilowatts. You understand, right? It's far much less. Maybe it's 50 itself. That's what they are using. So the consultant, when they were arriving at this, they accessed data. They saw that the vulnerable people, how much electricity are they using? Or could it be that there are other customer categories who are benefiting from the tariff line, which is not intended for them? That is why the consultant was saying, in keeping with the spirit of the lifeline, you have to reduce this to 50, because that is where the vulnerable people, they are using in that bound.
Okay.
So anything above that, it is other customers who are also benefiting from that. But of course, you raise a very important question that, look, this thing is impacting everybody. This is why now we have brought in maybe a request that the Energy Regulation Board must consider introducing a lower band, a residential band for the low, for the middle class, but low middle class, so that we have 3 bands of residential and spread the band appropriately, because that other 2 may be too broad. It's covering the middle class, it's also covering the high-end consumers, the upper members, so to speak.
Study findings, financial position of ZESCO and other companies in the sector. The study found that ZESCO's financial position needs urgent intervention, while the performance of other companies in the sector was generally favorable, as exhibited by their good financial health. We know that any other company that is dealing in electricity feeds into the ZESCO grid, and then ZESCO is the one to distribute. So when they are selling to ZESCO, they put a premium on their products, of which ZESCO pays for. But on the other part, ZESCO, when it comes to supplying, it's supplying it at a lower level than it is buying. That's why maybe those others are doing better. So do you think maybe as a country we would have allowed other players to stand independently and supply their own power to customers, as opposed to feeding into the ZESCO grid? I don't know how you think about this, where it is a requirement that if you have to invest in the energy sector, you have to feed in the ZESCO grid. Don't you think maybe government could have allowed some few players in the sector to stand independently in order to limit such challenges by the utility company?
You know, it's historical. The energy sector reforms have done quite considerably well, but we still have a number of bottlenecks to sort out. We were using what we call a single buyer model. A single buyer model is that if you invest in your own energy power generation plant, then you are constrained to sell to ZESCO as your off-taker. And of course that was quite preferred anyway. And then ZESCO uses this transmission and distribution network to supply to the customers. But the cost of electricity now has gone up considerably, especially from new generation power plants. It is considerably higher than the cost of production from ZESCO's old power plants. So part of the energy sector reforms aimed at opening up the liberalizing the market, so that if you have a willing buyer, then you can supply to your willing buyer, produce electricity, go and sell. But obviously not maybe to residential, but to the industry. Maybe you can have your own dedicated customer who is a major consumer, like maybe a mine or a major off-take of electricity. You can supply under the current legal framework. It is provided for. The only issue now there, which we have to be careful on, is that we don't want anyone who comes up with their own power plant to also start constructing their own transmission networks across the country, because then we are going to have a lot of transmission lines crisscrossing the country, so we don't have. This is what brings in now the concept of the common carrier. A common carrier means that I can use your transmission infrastructure, I can use your distribution infrastructure at an agreed price in order for me to save the customer. But in this particular unique case that we sit as a country, we have ZESCO also, who is producing electricity and has got this backbone of transmission. Then we also have independent power producers who have to depend on ZESCO, which is a competitor. So if you don't handle, if you are going to depend on your competitor to transport your electricity, there is a governance issue there that you have to be very careful on. Because if you are fighting for the same customer, chances are that you may not have it easier to access a transmission line. This is where now the unbundling, people that push for the unbundling of ZESCO comes in, that let it remain with the generation. Let transmission be a different company where everyone else who wants to transport electricity have to go to one particular customer. Otherwise, there is a chance that if there is a big mine that has opened up, whom I am targeting, ZESCO is also targeting it. It is very, very likely that I may not be able to get that because I'm competing with the one whom I want to depend on for the transportation of electricity. So we have these still bottlenecks that we need to resolve in order to perfect the industry.
One important finding in this study, Dr. Chikwanda, was on tariff migration plan. I put this at the end because I know it has been topical and something that is quite debatable. The study recommended two migration paths for implementation of the tariff migration. The first option was front-load the tariff increase to the extent of 70% in the first year, and then spread the balance of 30% over 4 years to 2026, or evenly spread the tariff over the 5-year period. On the tariff plan migration, the tariff migration plan, they recommend for the implementation of a tariff migration, for the first one, to increase by 70%, and then the other 30% be spread over a period of 4 years. So they're talking about 100% increase here. And then evenly spread the tariff over a 5-year period plan. What is your take on this part?
Yeah. First and foremost, let me clarify that it's not increasing by 100%, but 17%, which has been recommended. So over the next 5 years, the consultant said that if we can move by the tariffs on average by 17% over the next 5 years. So now there is a modality there of how do we implement this average 17%? Should we do it in the first year and forget about it? Or should we start with the 70% and then the remaining 30% of the 17%, then that is staggered? Or should we distribute evenly over the next 5 years? So those are the two proposed approaches to how we're going to migrate, if that is adopted in the white paper. So obviously, it depends on the situation at any given time. Even if we are saying 17%, if things determine, as you know, electricity is increased by ERB, it is possible that that can happen or it might not happen. But my feeling there is that we need to maybe phase it properly, evenly, instead of creating a jump. Maybe you can start with 40% of the 17%. That means you may be going up by 5%, then you remain with the remaining 12% distributed evenly. But ultimately, it depends on how members of the public are contributing. This is a golden opportunity when the one who increases electricity is going around the country, engaging the members of the public. Here is the paper. What is your take on this? So it is important that members of the public seize opportunities like this to engage the regulator and ask them questions that are important so that we're moving on the same page as a country. Consultative process, you rarely get things like this in different countries.
Maybe as we come to the dying minutes of the program, let's talk about the major electricity projects that the government recently talked about, like the Batuke Gorge power plant, and of course in Luapula, over the Luapula River, we did see government mention something about it when the president was attending the Mutomboko ceremony. How important will it be as a country if this is to come to life? Looking at, we know for a fact that the study has mentioned that the current power that we have is unsustainable. For the next, maybe to 2040, we need investment in the energy sector.
It is important. You know, the maximum we can get from our rivers, according to feasibility study, is 6,000 megawatts.
Okay.
That is the maximum we can get, about 6,000. And we also know that just by 2030, even according to government itself, they're saying it will be 8,000. So that means that by 2030 itself, we will have outstripped what the rivers can give us. That is if we have built power plants on these rivers. So the question that we must now be pondering is, where is Zambia's future electricity going to come from? That is a big thing. By 2040 itself, when power would be around the 10,000 megawatts, we'll have outstripped by 4,000 what we can get from the rivers. So where is Zambia's power going to be coming from going forward beyond what the rivers can give us? That question, very, very important for the sustainability of the industry and for feeding into the Africa Union vision of 2063, the Africa that we want, because we want to create a single African market. Coming to your question on the Batoka and the Luapula River there, looking at what we have currently, the current power demand on peak, and where government wants to be to take the economy, there is a gap which has been realized that it is impossible to achieve what government wants to achieve without adequate power, and one which can start now, which is sustainable, which you can depend on. And the only power sources at the moment that you say, this one can give me what I want, can support my ambition, is project like the Batoka Gorge. This is clean energy, it is hydro. You need that. I know we are susceptible to climate change, and also the one in Luapula.
Yeah, I know there is the issue of climate change.
Yes, I know there is this issue that the issue of the solar. That's I know about that. Solar at the moment is good for residential, but to power the industry, we still have considerable amount of time on our transition path if we have to depend on. So it's not something you can depend on sustainably to power the industry to the extent that we want. Meaning that we should be talking of hydro, we should be talking of thermal energy, like I saw in the budget speech that Mamba which uses coal, which is usually frowned upon by the climate diplomats, will have to develop a further 300 megawatts there as well, which is welcome development, because again, you want to be mitigating possibilities of what can happen should climate variability hit us. Luapula River is important to us, but you have to establish the Luapula River Authority. A mirror image of the Zambezi River Authority, because that's a shared resource with the DRC. So I know MOU was signed, but we need to actualize that MOU so that we begin to jointly develop a power plant over there. That is what will unlock development in Luapula River. There is no industrial power. All the manganese that comes there, you can't set up even a power plant. I know the president was there to commission that, but if you want that manganese to be refined there, it will virtually be very difficult because of inadequate power. So it has to be brought somewhere to Serenje, Mukushi, where all these smelters have been put up.
Dr. Johnson Chikwanda, pardon me, is an energy expert, and this morning we were discussing the sustainability of the energy sector in Zambia. We were also looking at the findings of the report that was done on the cost of service study by an independent company that was engaged by the Energy Regulation Board. We also spoke earlier on when we started the interview, we did speak about the fuel sector and how the monthly review has been performing so far, and some of the recommendations that Dr. Chikwanda has given to the government. We appreciate everyone who's kept us company on the program this morning. On our Facebook page there, I see Moses Injovu saying, morning, I'm watching you from live from Sinda. It's good to know Sinda is watching you from Monze Southern Province. That is Imboila Muyunda. Thank you so much. Shadrach Ngusu actually has a question, Dr. Chikwanda. If people in rural areas failed to pay last promotion for 250, what about when you increase the tariff? We are not making profit. Most Zambians, we are still struggling to our life. Please be fair. That is Shadrach Ngusu there. Then Christopher Kavaza says, solar works, visit, for instance, MySol countrywide. Their solar solution has got the capacity to power TV, phones, light, and stuff like that. So there is someone who actually agrees with you to say solar works. But Shadrach Ngusu there says,
It's a connection fee.
Even that's 250 to an fidwa, but increase.
It's a connection fee, Prudence. That's what I talked about. That I saw that the application had gone to ERB, where government just wanted to increase the connection fees. That issue has to be handled with caution, especially for the rural areas, because if you implement that to that extent, and it might just take people away from connecting. Rural Electrification Authority may take the power lines in all these villages, but to connect to it, if the amount is high, then it might be a problem. Because the thing he's talking about was a subsidized connection rate. Because World Bank was subsidizing. It was, I think, over 1,000, but the World Bank was paying in something there to make it easier. And saying some people are failing to even raise the subsidized amount. Now, what about even the new? That's, it is real.
Okay. Dr. Chikwanda, energy expert, this is where we have to come to the close of the program. So keep watching Camnet TV. We appreciate your viewership for everyone who's been watching and following us on different platforms. For those contributions and submissions, we appreciate your viewership at Camnet TV. Those are our #1 fans. We appreciate those who watch the program. I've received a lot of calls and a lot of recommendation from people who say, we always watch the program on Friday. For those ones, we appreciate your viewership. Keep watching Camnet TV. Remember, Camnet TV is not just another channel. From me, Prudence Chota, and the entire Camnet TV production team, and on behalf of my guest, Dr. Chikwanda, it's bye for now. God bless you. Till next time. But remember, keep watching Camnet TV. Bye-bye.